Hello everyone, this is Iran Talk, and in this video I'd like to take a look at Jason Jorjani's Caucasian fetish. Specifically, Jason Jorjani has a fetish for the Armenians, and what's ironic is that the Armenians tend to have less Indo-European ancestry than the general Iranian population, particularly the Persians, and thus are not a Nordic remnant population living within the Caucasus, which is likely what Jorjani considers them to be, as he has very high praise for them. I reckon that this opinion is largely influenced by Jason Jorjani's Caucasian admixed Qajar ancestors. For these reasons, Jason Jorjani's Caucasian fetish is indeed an interesting topic, and it will be covered in this video. I also wanted to emphasize the point that Jorjani's Caucasian fetish does not only apply to the Armenians but also the Tats, the Talysh, as well as the Ossetians. Now, without further ado, I'd like to begin this analysis. Jorjani's Caucasian fetish is evident from this X post in which he wrote, "Of all the peoples of the Caucasus that we love most and are dearest to our hearts, these are not the Iranian Tat, Talysh, or Ossetians, it's the Armenians. As per Khosrow and Shirin, you've been part of our history for millennia." This post was in response to one of Jorjani's older posts in which he wrote, "The Caucasus is, as we say in Persian, the head of Iran. The Caucasus will always be Iran. Azerbaijan, Iran, Georgia, Iran. Death to the Russians who made the mistake of taking and destroying a third of our country. Hail Prometheus." I think Jorjani is very much right about the Russian conquest of the Caucasus. Nonetheless, his Caucasian fetish is still disgusting. It's also worth mentioning that, historically, the wife of Khosrow II, Shirin, has been attested to be of Aramaean origin and not of Armenian origin, as Jorjani falsely claims. Thus, Jason is indeed falsifying the historic record to justify his Caucasian fetish. This Caucasian fetish is the result of Jorjani's false belief that the Caucasian populations are genetically much more Indo-European than the average Iranian, particularly the South Caucasian populations. This sort of nonsense has permeated Jason Jorjani's work, particularly his interviews with others. As you can see from this image, Jorjani is shown as having a very Nordic phenotype, and this is for one of his upcoming interviews with Lev Polinkov of BTR, or Break the Rules. In contrast to that phenotypic depiction, here is what Jorjani actually looks like, and he's very chubby, he's very out of shape, and above all, he's very ugly. In order to refute Jason Jorjani's false belief that the South Caucasians are more Indo-European than Iranians, I will be presenting a genetic analysis, and here are the source populations I will be utilizing through the Global 25 calculator. Nearly all of these populations date from the Epipaleolithic through the Mesolithic and up to the Neolithic, with the only exception being the Yamnayan Samara component, which is the Indo-European ancestry, and that dates back to the early Bronze Age. Here are the autosomal results for the Armenians, and you can see they're on average 43.9% Anatolian farmer, 25.9% Caucasian hunter-gatherer, 20.5% Iranian farmer, 7.3% Natufian, and 2.4% Yamnayan Samara. Thus, what's evident from these results is that the Armenians have minimal Indo-European genetic contribution and actually are primarily of Anatolian farmer, Caucasian hunter-gatherer, and Iranian farmer descent, with a bit of Natufian ancestry as well. In contrast, the Persians, as well as other Iranian populations, are on average 36% Iranian farmer, 29.5% Anatolian farmer, 13.9% Yamnayan Samara, 11.2% Caucasian hunter-gatherer, 6.7% Natufian, 1.6% India Mesolithic, and 1.1% Siberian East Asian. Thus, these results prove that the Iranians of today on average have more Indo-European ancestry and less Natufian ancestry as well, which is very interesting. Here are the autosomal results for the Tatar and Talysh, and they're on average 33.4% Anatolian farmer, 26.2% Iranian farmer, 19.2% Caucasian hunter-gatherer, 13.5% Yemenian Samara, 4.7% Natufian, 2.4% Siberian, and 0.6% India Mesolithic. Thus, much like the Armenians, the Tatar and Talysh have less Indo-European ancestry than the Iranians, and what this suggests is that they are not a Nordic remnant, but rather just an indigenous South Caucasian population. Finally, here are the results for the North and South Ossetians, and they're on average 48.9% Caucasian hunter-gatherer, 27.4% Anatolian farmer, 14.9% Yemenian Samara, 4.9% East Asian, 3.5% Natufian, and 0.4% Iranian farmer. Thus, the North and South Ossetians are not an Indo-European remnant population, but rather are just another indigenous Caucasian population. Before I conclude, I just wanted to mention that Jorjani's Caucasian fetish is very old, and it was even evident from his 2019 monograph Iranian Leviathan. In Iranian Leviathan, Jorjani wrote that in order to make the Iranians 50% pure Iranian, which in his view is a Nordic population, he wanted Kurds and Azeris, especially the Tatar and Talysh, to serve as sperm donors for Iranians. But not only this, he also mentioned that he would prefer Tajiks from Tajikistan and Afghanistan, as well as the Talysh from northern Azerbaijan as mentioned, and also Kurds from Iraq and Syria, to replace the genome of the Persians, which is much purer than all of these populations. And for this reason, Jorjani is very delusional, and this is just another aspect of his Caucasian fetish. To conclude, in this analysis, I took a look at Jason Reza Jorjani's Caucasian fetish and proved that in contrast to his beliefs, the South Caucasian populations, particularly the Armenians, are not genetically more Indo-European than the Iranians, and neither are they genetically a Nordic European population. Furthermore, it seems to be the case that Jason Reza Jorjani prefers the Southern Caucasian Armenians as well as the Tatar and Talysh over ethnic Iranian populations, particularly the Persians. In fact, this also applies to the North and South Ossetians. Thus, my analysis served to expose the delusional Caucasian fetish of Jason Reza Jorjani. That is it for this video. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.